Welcome back to Through the Forest Window. I'm Terry Kelly, and today we're continuing our journey through the pages of a logbook that chronicles life at the cabin in the woods of Ontario. In our last episode, we explored the spring of 2010, when the building of the cabin began and my father passed away. Today, we'll walk through that first summer at the cabin, a season filled with friendships, adventures, and learning. Through entries spanning from June to September 2010, we'll explore everything from encounters with wildlife to bike rides on old rail trails, from friends helping with construction to children building their own cabin in the woods. We'll make a pilgrimage to my father's childhood home in the Irish settlement areas of Hastings Highlands, while back at the cabin, we'll see how this new space became a gathering point for both old friends and new visitors. It's a story about finding my way in the woods, sometimes on an inadequate mountain bike, and always with good company. Father's Day, June 20th, 2010. Our first entry comes from June 20th, 2010. What would have been Dad's 63rd birthday, and fittingly, Father's Day. The entry begins with an encounter that reminds us how the woods have a way of bringing unexpected connections. While biking in, I met Dieter and his two dogs. Dieter was on a four-wheeler and had a German accent. He mentioned he had a cottage on the nearby lake. He was looking for and found some wild mushrooms. Cabin looks good. Lots of natural field flowers blooming. Today would be Dad's 63rd birthday. Today is also Father's Day. What strikes me about this entry now is its simplicity, the way it weaves together the ordinary and the profound. There's Dieter hunting mushrooms, natural flowers blooming, and then that stark reminder of absence. Today would be Dad's 63rd birthday. The cabin offered a space where these different threads of life could coexist, where grief could sit alongside the simple pleasure of watching wildflowers bloom. Building together, June 25th to the 27th, 2010. As summer progressed, the cabin continued to take shape. Though Dad was no longer with us, the work went on. The next few entries capture how friends and family stepped in to help with various projects, each bringing their own skills and energy to the space. An entry from late June tells of a weekend spent with my friend Peter. Peter became one of the friends who really stepped up during this period of loss and transition in my life. The entry begins with my arrival at the cabin. I'm in for the weekend, arrived around 7 p.m. The plan is to stain the deck, but rain is in the forecast. There was a big spider here on the floor. I didn't like that. Peter plans on coming up tomorrow, and that will be fun. I brought in 2 cans of stain, 2 jugs of water, and a can of gas on my mountain bike trailer. The rough road, with its deep mud pits and protruding rocks, was too much for my sedan to handle. My solution, as my loved ones would say with an eye roll, was characteristically stubborn. I was determined to bike everything in. 2 cans of stain, water jugs, and a can of gas strapped to a mountain bike trailer, pedaling 4 kilometers down that old road. Looking back, there were probably easier ways to do this, but that combination of determination, or stubbornness, depending on who you ask, became a defining part of my relationship with this place. And then there was the spider, finding a big spider here on the floor, as I noted in my entry, adding, "I didn't like that." It's funny to read that now, as it captures my early adjustment to cabin life. I later learned it was a wolf spider, one of the most common woodland spiders in Ontario. These robust hunters, which can be quite large, are actually beneficial creatures that help control other insects around the cabin. Unlike web-spinning spiders, they actively hunt their prey on the ground, which explains why I found this one crossing the cabin floor. They're a natural part of forest ecosystems throughout the Canadian Shield, though that knowledge didn't make our first encounter any less startling. I'd spent countless trips backcountry canoeing and camping in Algonquin Park, and I thought that made me something of an expert in wilderness living. But I quickly learned there's a big difference between visiting the wilderness and actually maintaining a permanent space within it. I was still very much a city person, learning to coexist with all sorts of creatures I rarely encountered in my normal home environment. Each challenge, whether logistical or psychological, was teaching me a new way of being in this space. The entry from that weekend continues. It's 1:30 p.m. Sunday, and I'm preparing to leave. Peter and I installed the carpet in the loft. We went into town on Saturday and rented a carpet kicker. I'm grateful for Peter's motivation, otherwise the carpet wouldn't have been finished. Peter designed a rug, and it's on the main level. Peter made chicken tikka masala dish. Very good. This weekend captures something essential about life at the cabin, the way work and pleasure intertwine, how a day of carpeting can end with shared meals and moments of creativity. Peter's contribution to the cabin went beyond the practical carpeting job. He took a small piece of leftover carpet and, in a playful burst of creativity, used red tuck tape to create an elaborate design celebrating our friendship and including our friend Jeff. This makeshift art piece, part practical floor covering, part friendship memorial, became one of those quirky cabin touches that always makes me smile. It represented exactly what I needed during those early months after Dad's passing. Friends who could bring both steady support and unexpected moments of joy. The combination of practical work and friendship created something special that weekend. There's something about tackling a project together, sharing a meal, and finding moments to be creative that strengthens bonds. These are the kinds of experiences that make the cabin more than just a structure in the woods. It's a place where friendships deepen and memories take root. New Generations, July 2010. Some of the most memorable entries from that summer come from late July, when my niece Emma and Chloe spent time at the cabin. Chloe is the daughter of my friend Jeff, who, like Peter from our earlier entry, was one of my closest friends during this time. It's no coincidence that Peter included Jeff in that playful rug design. These were the friends who showed up for me during this period of my life, who understood the weight of the work we did together and the importance of unwinding in places like this. Sharing the cabin with his family felt natural. Their entries capture the pure adventure of youth, especially Chloe's account of their woodland escapades.
It's 5 p.m. and Emma and I are building our own little cabin. We had to stop after a while because we were getting eaten alive by the bugs. We went to the beaver pond to watch the sunset. We missed the sunset, but we sat at the duck hunting shack where Emma did her moose call. We waited, but nothing came.
I actually managed to capture Emma's moose call on my phone that evening. Here's what it sounded like at the duck hunting shack as day turned to dusk.
Can you rub it?
Dad was the one who introduced us all to moose calling. He'd cup his hands around his mouth and let out these long, low calls into the forest. Over the years, I've witnessed countless attempts at calling moose, Dad's, other hunters, my own, and now Emma's, and I have to admit, I've never once heard a moose reply. but somehow that never stopped us from trying. Later that weekend, Emma wrote her own entry in the logbook. There's something especially moving about seeing these days through her 10-year-old eyes.
We went to Papa's hunting shack in the woods. I made a rock and put it by a tree near his shack. This was my first weekend without my Papa being around after he passed. I climbed up in the tree stand with my Papa and biked in with him, and now we're going to bike out together.
Reading this entry now, there's something profoundly moving in how Emma, at just 10 years old, found her own way to keep Papa present. Notice how she writes about climbing the tree stand with Papa and biking with him, speaking in the present tense as if he were still there beside her. Children often have this remarkable ability to hold on to those they love through imagination, finding comfort in continuing shared rituals even after loss. Her words show how this place, with all its memories of Papa, allowed her to maintain that connection in her own way. The rock she placed by his hunting shack wasn't just a marker. It was part of an ongoing conversation between granddaughter and grandfather, taking place in a space where memories felt most alive. A week in September. By September, I'd started a tradition that would continue for years to come, taking a week at the cabin during the early fall. A detailed entry from September 4th to 9th captures the rich variety of experiences that filled these days. Tracy and I arrived here with friends Melanie and Jamie, Josh and Ryan mid-afternoon Saturday. In the afternoon, I showed the boys and Jamie the camp, and we walked back past Dawn's hunting stand. Jamie and I made a pot of spaghetti sauce for dinner. Tracy, Melanie, and the boys watched the Raining Spaghetti movie, and later we watched City Island, which was a great movie. These weekend gatherings were becoming an important part of cabin life, sharing the space with friends, cooking together, watching movies powered by the generator. But the week would take on different tones as it progressed. On Monday, I drove Tracy into Belleville for an 8:45 train to Ottawa. She was traveling to Vermont and dealing with her visa to India. This moment captures an interesting intersection in our lives. While I was deepening my connection to this place in the woods, Tracy was beginning her career as an international consultant. The cabin became a kind of anchor point as our lives expanded in different directions. After seeing Tracy off, I found myself drawn to explore family history. I traveled to Dad's original homestead in Greenview near Maynooth, Ontario, and had a beer with the current owner and his wife. That visit to Dad's homestead was remarkable. The current owner gave me a tour of the house and walked me around the property, sharing stories about the Irish families who'd settled the area. The history here runs deep. It wasn't until the 1840s and 1850s that waves of immigrants, many fleeing the Irish potato famine, made their way to the newly surveyed townships in northern Hastings County. You can still see this heritage reflected in local place names: Mayo, Maynooth, Wicklow, Mayo Lake, and O'Brien Lake, each echoing the origins of those early settlers. Standing there, hearing about the generations of families who'd made lives in this rocky, challenging terrain, I felt a deeper connection to not just my own family's history, but to the broader tapestry of settlement in the area. These were people who'd left everything behind, crossing an ocean to build new lives in what must have seemed like an impossibly remote wilderness. Another entry from that week reveals how the solitude of the cabin also provided space for creativity. I set up my music stuff at night and edited some previous recordings. I recorded 2 cover songs, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For by U2, and Billy Austin by Steve Earle. Music became another way to process grief and find expression during this time. There's something about the acoustic qualities of a cabin in the woods that lends itself to recording. And these cover songs, particularly U2's Searching lyrics, reflected my own state of mind. In another entry from that week, I documented what might seem like an outrageous adventure. At 12:30 p.m., I started biking to Bancroft on the old railway bed. It took 2.5 hours. I visited Fred and Jenny for an hour as they were at a spa near Bancroft. At 4:30 p.m., I commenced traveling back to the cabin on my bike and arrived at around 7 p.m. It was 80 kilometers in total. I was tired. I saw 5 deer along the way. It was beautiful scenery. Looking back now, what makes me shake my head is that I attempted this journey on what I now know was a completely inadequate bike. With my current understanding of mountain biking, I wouldn't take that particular bike even 10 kilometers on a trail, let alone 80. Yet there I was, pushing that basic machine along the Heritage Trail, blissfully unaware of its limitations. The trip included a stop to visit my in-laws, Fred and Jenny, who were staying at a nearby spa, then back on the trail, encountering deer and taking in the scenery. Those quiet moments of connection with wildlife made the journey meaningful, even if the equipment was far from ideal. The week concluded with some significant progress on the cabin itself. Thursday morning, I traveled by car to meet Mike at the lumber yard. I spent $1,100 on pine siding for the cabin. Mike installed the drywall for me inside the cabin for the remainder of the afternoon. Working on the cabin with my brother Mike has always been special. These shared projects gave us a different way to spend time together, to connect through the work of our hands. Even now, years later, when we're at the cabin together, we can look at certain features and remember the day we installed them, the challenges we overcame, the conversations we had while working. I still laugh thinking about Mike cutting a small rectangle from the drywall when we had it outside, and then pretending to get electrocuted when his hand passed near where the outlet would eventually be. For some reason, that sight of him dramatically acting out an electric shock just struck me as hilarious. It's these little moments of levity during the work that stick with you. This week in September really captured what the cabin had become, a place for gatherings and solitude, for remembering and creating, for physical challenges and quiet reflection. It was becoming exactly what I'd hoped it would be when Dad and I first started planning it, though perhaps in ways I hadn't anticipated. That first summer without Dad was a season of transitions, of learning to carry forward his legacy while creating new traditions. Through these logbook entries, we see how the cabin served as both a mirror and a window, reflecting back our memories while offering new views forward. Thank you for joining me for this second episode of Through the Forest Window. Next time, we'll explore the fall entries of 2010 as the forest prepared for winter and we continued to make this place our own. Through the Forest Window is written and narrated by Terry Kelly, supported by artificial intelligence technology. The theme music from this episode was written or recorded by Terry Kelly, derived from years of voice memo recordings, unreleased material, and works in progress. The late great Ellie Kelly appeared on accordion in the theme music. Special thanks to Emma and Chloe for reading their logbook entries shared in this episode. Tracy Fenton provides artistic direction support, and Ken Tizard masters all podcast episodes.